Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I am your host, Randi-lee. On today's episode, I am going to be talking to Sandra Stachowicz. Welcome, Sandra. Super excited to have you.
Thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. And where are you joining us from?
So I'm joining from the city of best-selling authors from Edinburgh in Scotland.
Nice. So what time is it for you?
It's like early afternoon, 4 o'clock.
Okay. I'm just before lunchtime. So after we do our interview, I'll go have lunch.
I've admittedly not had lunch yet.
And it's already almost 4 o'clock?
Yeah, but I'm currently toying with intermittent fasting, so I don't really feel hungry.
Okay.
Late breakfast.
Okay, that's all right. Me, I love to eat on my scheduled time. I'm like a puppy that way.
I used to be exactly the same before. I just had like a little piece of dark chocolate before, just so I don't die.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I'm a book strategist. I'm a 5 times bestselling author myself, a ghostwriter, and I work with women entrepreneurs, and I help them write, publish, and launch their book to bestseller. But the difference is that the way I work with clients is they don't sell their soul to the devil, and they write their bestseller without compromising on their message, their values, their creative rights, or their book royalties. So this is something that I really pride myself as, because I really believe that as an author, you are the prize and not the publishing house.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But that's like what you do. Who are you?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So I really see myself as a narcissistic-abuse survivor. I was born and raised in Poland. I was raised by a single mother of 5, and I'm also a college dropout. So in that sense, I'm probably the most unlikely person to become a best-selling author. English is obviously not my first language, and I was actually told that my English wasn't good enough. So when I applied to college, I was turned down, and I was told that my English wasn't good enough. And I have obviously proved them wrong.
Yeah.
By becoming a 5 times best-selling author 10 years later. But when I first applied to college, I was actually told, or the professors were really concerned that my English wasn't up to scratch. I was actually forced to take critical writing classes, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
Well, good then. Good.
And I'm also a middle child, so I have 2 younger and 2 older sisters, and I feel like that's a huge part of my story and who I really am. Part of my story is that I lost my dad early on, so I was only 15 at the time. So this meant that my mother, who was back then, she was a stay-at-home mom. She had no job, no experience, no cent to her name, and overnight she had to become the main breadwinner.
Oh, wow. So your dad died suddenly?
Yeah, so he passed away suddenly, overnight, likely of a heart attack. So I knew that growing up in post-communist Poland, that my options were rather limited. And I had a resolve, and I decided, that's when I made up my mind. Back then, I worked as a nanny. So at the time when I decided to leave Scotland, I was only 19. And I decided, well, obviously, I'm done working for £1, or roughly like $1 an hour. And I was only 19. I was already starting to show first signs of depression, when my peers were, dating, living the life of their dreams, were starting university, and I just felt like I'm done. Like, I need to get out of here, because there's really nothing else for me to do here. So this is what really propelled me to move across the sea to Scotland. So I bought a one-way ticket. I was like really brave, like even in hindsight, like looking back. Like
Yeah.
I left my family home. So that basically meant that mom had one mouth less to feed.
Which for her could be good.
Yeah. And I moved across the sea to Scotland to start a life for myself. I struggled to find a job for the first month, and I literally had the holes and the bottom of my shoes the size of my fist.
Wow.
Around the Edinburgh to find a job, and I only had like I didn't even have enough money to get me through the month, and it took me a month to find a job as a housekeeper. But it was by the time the month was over, I had not only found a job for myself, but also for my older sister.
Oh, wow.
I invited her over. So she took up the job that I turned down. So that was the first job offer I received. And actually, my older sister ended up taking up that job. And I ended up working as a housekeeper. So I had very humble beginnings. And I decided, well, I actually love living here. I like living here. Like I could, and then I came up with the idea, well, actually, I could study here. And I applied to college. So that was when I was actually told that my English wasn't good enough. And then I decided to continue to progress to university. And once again, I was told that my English wasn't good enough. And that's when I was forced to take up critical rating course as part of the conditional offer I received from university.
Okay. Wow. So what did you end up, and I know you said you dropped out, but what did you try to go to college for?
So I originally started out, so I went to the first university I applied to, actually dropped out after a year. So I studied tourism management with languages, but I very quickly realized that hospitality is probably not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then I decided, well, actually, I've always wanted to be a translator. And I decided to study translation.
Okay. And did you finish the translation one?
Yeah, I did finish the translation one.
Okay. And did you work as a translator?
Well, briefly, yes. I worked as a volunteer translator for TED. So it was almost like a fate. That was years later, I was interviewed as a guest expert on TED because I have previously worked as a volunteer for them.
Cool. Very cool. And so let's talk about your depression. You said that you had noticed that you had depression when everybody else was going out and living their best life. So how did you come to realize that you had depression?
Yeah, so back then when I was 19, I believe I showed first clinical signs of depression. I lost appetite. I just wasn't really interested in socializing, going out. I just felt like my life was over. But the actual depression didn't actually really kick in until I was about 26 years old. So back then I was already a graduate. And at that point in my life, I worked for a minimum wage job. So rather than work as a translator, I worked as a mailroom assistant for a minimum wage. I worked for an agency. It wasn't even a steady job. And back then, I really started toying with the idea of starting a business. And in the meantime, I also qualified as a massage therapist, so also doubled as a massage therapist, so you can live on a minimum wage if you live in Edinburgh.
You live pretty much anywhere.
Exactly. And so that's when I really started playing with the idea of starting an online business. I became really interested in personal development.
Okay.
And ironically, this is when I contracted a life-threatening illness that typically only babies and toddlers get.
What?
So it's similar to chickenpox. I never had chickenpox as a child.
Oh, so shingles.
It's not shingles. You can only catch shingles if you've had chickenpox. So it was
okay.
It's Coxsackie. So it's from the same family of viruses. You get
Okay.
similar symptoms, but it's only affects your hand and your feet, and it could also potentially affect other areas of your body. So basically, what ended up happening, I had a really bad case of Coxsackie. Interestingly enough, it's something that I caught from my cousin's 4-year-old child. And my
Okay.
cousin also had the exact same symptoms, so we suffered, at the same time. We were on the phone all the time.
Oh, well, at least you suffered together.
Exactly. So we suffered together, but like remotely because it was contagious.
Yeah.
That meant I couldn't leave the house. My sister back then was on holiday, so I was basically left on my own. And I basically felt like my whole body was on fire. So I literally felt like at the age of 26, it got so bad that I really felt. And back then we didn't even know what it was. We didn't have a name for it. There was no cure, and I literally felt like I was dying. And all my hands and my feet, the soles of my feet were covered in a really painful rash. It literally made me feel like my body was on fire. And it got to a point that my feet were so swollen I could no longer stand on my feet for any period of time. I had to crawl on my all fours to get to the bathroom. I couldn't go out, I couldn't leave to get groceries because I was so poorly. So you could say I was bedridden.
Yeah.
I survived, so complete strangers. I survived thanks to my massage clients. And originally, I actually thought that I contracted. One of my clients had eczema, and I felt like as soon as I was done with the massage and I started experiencing this a painful rash, like this is weird. I know you can't get eczema. Eczema is not a skin condition that's contagious.
Oh.
So there are a lot of thoughts running through my head, like I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And that was my worst. When I hit rock bottom, I just bawling my eyes out, like I don't know what this is, like I don't want to die. I had no one to take me to hospital because my family and my cousins live in another town. Everyone was afraid of catching it. So desperate, I reached out to help to my landlord. He then refused to help me because he was afraid his wife would catch it. Then I reached out to my boyfriend of 1 year, and then he basically lied in my face that he was in Paris. He didn't want to have anything to do with me, so I was basically on my own. My sister was in our home country on holidays. So I was basically left to my own devices, relying on my massage clients to buy groceries. That's how bad it got. My best friend helped a little bit, but there also one point in time where I felt like, she could have done better. But I'm still eternally grateful to her because I survived thanks to her. I'll never forget the taste of the bouillon soup, chicken soup that she made for me.
Oh, that's good.
That she wasn't afraid to even be around me, knowing that it was contagious.
Yeah.
So that just shows love and support.
Yeah.
So this was the beginning, and so basically, I was within a period of 6 months, I was laid off from my steady agency job. I contracted a life-threatening illness, was basically bedridden. The love of my life decided to check himself out of my life at the time when I needed him the most.
Well, we don't like him anyways.
No job. My landlord decided to kick me out because I couldn't keep up with the rent payments. So basically ended up homeless all within the short period of time of 6 months.
Whoa.
So really shake you to the core. And by then I had already shown symptoms of depression. So I found it really difficult to even get through the day. I believe my illness only like shook me to the core and just made me realize, well, actually, Sandra, you're on your own. You're on your own. There's no one. The knight in shining armor is not coming.
Yeah.
So that was the point in my life where I felt really betrayed. I felt really lonely and just bereft. I felt like I was grieving because I thought I was literally dying.
Yeah.
At first, they didn't even know what it was. They thought it was chicken pox because I didn't have chicken pox as a child, and they thought, or maybe you have something else. So there was really no cure for it. All my nails on my toes, on my fingers just fell apart. My skin was shedding. So that actually took me 6 months to fully recover. Obviously, that meant I couldn't work as a massage therapist anymore. I didn't have a minimum wage job anymore. And that's when I turned to the only thing I knew could save me. So I turned to online marketing business. And ironically, that like really took off. So within a very short period of time, I did really well. So I started working for really big names in the industry. So my marketing business really took off. And so really that had a lot of almost like foresight that even started toying with the idea of starting an online marketing business, because ultimately that's what really saved me. This is what really allowed me to thrive as a person and entrepreneur, because I had that little ray of hope to.
Oh, good. That's so good, because that is a horrible story. 6 months and basically your entire life just falls to pieces while you're feeling like death.
Yeah, but the good thing is actually that gave me the basis for my book. So it wasn't actually until years later that they decided, well, actually, I have a really compelling, rags to riches story.
Yeah.
I was being homeless, unemployed, then abandoned on my deathbed. So that really gave me the courage, because I believe that when we're really pushed to the limit, if we feel like, or we reach the point where we feel like I can't take anymore, that's usually, if we push through, that's usually when we find the strength that we felt we never even really had.
Yeah.
So I really had to find the strength in myself to really turn a really painful and devastating experience into something really enlightening.
Yeah. And something that can help other people.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was also my motivation behind it, because I really wanted to show our people, and women especially, that no matter what they've been through or where they currently are, what they're currently dealing with, that there's always hope. There's always hope. I wanted to send a message that they're not alone.
Yeah.
That there are other people who are either currently or have already overcome whatever it is that they're currently dealing with. So that was my message. I really wanted to send a message of hope to let other women and people who are currently dealing with mental health or whatever other health challenges, that they're not alone in this, that there are other people who are currently dealing with or have overcome something very similar.
Yeah, which is fantastic. We need more of that in the world.
Yeah.
So what kind of strategies have you learned to help manage your depression?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And personally, I find that it's a lot easier. And one thing I'll also say about managing depression, I feel like this might be semantics, but personally, I don't really believe in managing emotions, because emotions are not there to be managed. Emotions need to be felt and experienced. And I feel that part of the problem is actually the approach of managing, or even coping strategies, managing your depression. You do not manage your depression. So I feel that what really works for us to feel better is to really, first of all, the acknowledging and the awareness that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not. We've all been there. We've all done that, and it's something we can all relate to. So it's about recognizing that it's okay to not feel okay. There's no shame. There's no guilt, because if we stack more guilt and shame on top of depression or mental health issues, whether that's having panic attacks, whether that's seasonal affective disorder, whether that's suicidal thoughts or PTSD or whatnot, or anxiety, we have just made our symptoms 10 times worse.
Yeah.
So I feel part of the healing process is to really no longer seeing mental health or mental health issues as something to be ashamed of, because there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, so in terms of how to manage symptoms, I feel that what really works better is being more proactive rather than reactive. So let's say when I experienced panic attacks, which is maybe like 2 to 3 months ago, obviously when you're in the midst of a panic attack, there's really not much. I mean, you don't think rationally. You just feel like you're being thrown into the throes of it. It's just this monster that you can't tackle. So that's why I feel that what really works a lot better is if we are a lot more proactive in our approach rather than being reactive. So rather than me reacting to panic attacks, I take a more proactive approach and schedule 30 minutes a day to take care of my mental well-being. So it could be as simple as a journaling exercise that I like to focus on feelings, because feelings, emotions just want to be felt and experienced. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling depressed, feelings just want to be felt and experienced. So as stacking shame and guilt on top of sadness, that just makes it worse. So what I suggest is that we really get in touch with our feelings. So I like using I feel statements. I could, for example, say, I feel sad because, whatever comes after it. And this in turn makes me feel, and I just fill in the blanks. And then another one I use is I feel disappointed because, and I fill in the blanks, and this in turn makes me feel, whatever the reason behind it is. Or I could use I feel angry because, and this in turn makes me feel. I find that it's a lot easier to work with the feelings of sadness and disappointment as opposed to anger, because anger is just inverted sadness. You could do all the work on anger, but the anger is almost like this never-ending bottomless pit that you just can't get to the bottom of. And I feel that anger is actually sadness, because sometimes we use anger. Anger is more like a self-protection mechanism. If I get angry at someone, that means I don't need to experience my sadness, because then someone else is to blame. But the truth is, at the end of the day, like I feel disappointed in them, or I feel sad because of whatever it is that they did, whether it's something they did to me, or so it's a lot easier to get almost to the bottom of our emotional state if we really focus on feelings of sadness and disappointment, as opposed to trying to get to the bottom of anger, that bottomless. Yeah, so this is something that really helps me. I'd also say that throughout the day, it's also a good practice even just close. What I sometimes do is just literally close my eyes, especially if I've had a busy day, hectic day. I could literally close my eyes for 2 minutes and just take deep breaths in and out, 10 deep breaths. It doesn't have to be long. Oftentimes, I'm not one of those people that meditate for 2 hours a day.
It works for some.
Yeah, that's why I'm more into practical, easy, easily applicable tools and strategies that we can actually fit around our oftentimes hectic schedule. So when closing our eyes, really dropping into our heart space, really grounding ourselves. It doesn't have to be, or even in the morning, first thing in the morning, if I know I have a busy day ahead, I could just close my eyes and do my breathing exercises, breathe in and out like 10 times for 2 minutes. It's as simple as that. Because oftentimes when we experience anxiety, when we experience panic attack or any uncomfortable feelings, then I feel it's a lot easier to prevent those emotions from happening by having some grounding tools and strategies, rather than waiting for them to happen and then responding to whatever happens. Because when you're feeling sad, I know sometimes there are moments where we feel so overwhelmed by our emotions that there's really nothing we can do to make it better.
Yeah, it's true. Once you get to that certain level, then you have to wait until you kind of come back down and start thinking rationally again.
Yeah, and I feel sometimes that can actually help. So rather than judging our emotions, so whenever I have like an off day, I don't judge myself. So if I decide if I'm having a bad day and I feel like spending half a day in bed, then that's exactly what I'll do. But it's all about the energy behind it. So rather than me judging myself, oh, Sandra, you should be doing more. You should be doing better. Like you just spent half a day in bed. Like, this is a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
I really allow myself to go there, that's okay. Like I'm allowed. I give myself permission to have a bad day. You're a lot more likely to come out of that fit of despair sooner because you don't stack shame and guilt on top of all these uncomfortable emotions.
It's so true. When you judge yourself, you're just adding more guilt onto it because you're not doing what you think you should be doing.
Yeah. So that's why I feel that sometimes even like allowing yourself, giving yourself permission, let yourself off the hook. If you're having a bad day, just literally let yourself off the hook, make the most of it. Like, even if you spend half a day in bed.
Yeah.
Because you could spend half a day in bed, or if you judge yourself, shame yourself for staying in bed, then you could actually end up staying 3 days in bed as opposed to half a day.
It's true. It's so true. And sometimes I find that if I judge myself and make myself guilty and make myself then get out of bed because I'm guilty about not getting whatever project needs done, the work that I'm doing isn't very good anyways.
Exactly. Like we are not really productive whenever we shame ourselves into doing something, and we do it with the wrong energy, with almost like self-punishing energy.
Yeah.
Then the chances are we are not going to do the best work we came here to do.
Exactly. So I like how you said that if you give yourself permission to just do what you need to do in that moment, then when you finally get out of bed, you're going to be so much more productive.
Yeah, so very true. It could even be something as simple as binge watching Netflix. There's not necessarily anything wrong with binge watching Netflix. If this is something that helps you process your emotions, it all depends on whether or not, if you're using Netflix to numb your emotions, which is something I don't recommend.
Yeah.
But if you're doing more as a reward, or maybe something more, well, actually, I want to help, like I want to process my emotions, and I watch a tearjerker film that can actually help me. Even if I shed a few tears, that can actually make me feel better. So it's all about the energy, not so much about what we do, but about the energy about behind what we do that really matters.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what would you tell somebody who's listening right now and experiencing their own depression?
Yeah, so first of all, just tell them that you are not alone. I have walked in your shoes. I see you. I hear you. And there are hundreds of other people that are currently going through what you're going through. Because oftentimes we feel very lonely and isolated. We feel like we're the only person.
Yeah.
We feel like we feel like there's no help. Like we feel like there's nothing. So there's this energy of helplessness and hopelessness. Like I'm alone in this. And it's almost that like that desperate energy. I want someone to save me. I want someone to tell me that I'll be okay. I want someone to tell me that I'm not going to feel like that for the rest of my life, that there's hope. So sometimes we just need that one person to really let us know, like, I'm here for you. I'm here to hear you out and to be that shining beacon of light. If to really send a message, hey, you're not alone. There are other people who are currently struggling with mental health issues, or have the ones who have overcome, or maybe the ones who periodically deal with mental health issues, to really put that human face to depression, mental health, and really take shame and guilt out of mental health issues.
Yes, that is so beautifully said.
Yeah, so just before I jumped on the call with you today, actually one of my mentors, who's a business mentor, she's a 7-figure business mentor, and she shared she's a mother of 4 babies, under, I believe all of them are under the age of 5.
Oh my
and
goodness.
She oftentimes feels like self-harming herself. At times she feels compelled to harm her babies. And if she can openly admit it on her Facebook page, then there's no reason we should feel ashamed.
It's true. And just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that you would actually act upon those feelings. And I think that's where a lot of the shame and the guilt comes from, is that you're worried other people are going to think that you're actually going to follow through on it. But it's not about following through. It's about recognizing that I am so stressed or upset, or I'm just in a state of chaos that I feel this way. I'm not going to follow through on this, but I want people to understand where it is that I'm feeling in this life right now, in this moment.
Yeah, and I feel like this act alone, even publicly admitting I'm dealing with depression or grief or seasonal affective disorder or whatnot, postpartum depression, if it's anxiety or panic attacks, even this act alone can really help us get better. Because then we just take shame out of the equation. And then we can very quickly recognize, well, we are not alone.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, just before I jump on the call, I did a post on Facebook asking people if they've ever felt, because people don't fake depression, they fake being okay. And I asked for a show of hands, have you ever felt like you had to, like you ever had to fake being okay? And I was really surprised. I was really surprised the number of comments, how openly and vulnerably everyone shared. And this just goes to show that we are not alone. Oftentimes we think we are the only person, and then we really share openly and vulnerably, when we very quickly realize that there's hundreds of other people, and this alone can really makes us feel relieved, because then we recognize, well, actually, I'm not the only person. And if I can share openly and vulnerably, then I give others permission to do the same.
Yes. Love that. Everyone needs permission to own their feelings and be okay with what they're feeling. It's the only way to be able to get help with them too, is to recognize that they're there.
It's so very true. And also having that community support. So knowing that there are other people who care, because oftentimes we think that we are alone in this. I'll never forget when I actually took time out for a year. So took like a year sabbatical when I felt my business, like I lost my business sense of direction in my business. See, my bills didn't, and I took a year out and I actually spent that time traveling. And I'll never forget, there was this one woman, she wasn't even a client of mine. I once offered her a healing session on childhood trauma. And she messaged me saying, Sandra, I have noticed your absence. I've not seen any other content for a year. And that just made me feel like I'm not alone. There are other people that actually care. So sometimes it's the little things that can really make a difference. So when I realized that one of my friends, so someone I have never met in person, and he confessed that he's feeling depressed. So that also means that I'm more compassionate. I'm more understanding towards him, and I check in with him regularly, and I ask him, even today, like, do you feel like you currently have the level of support that you need, or do you feel like you have someone that you can talk to? And I was really glad when he responded that yes, he did. And it's not always been that way. So sometimes even complete strangers, someone I've never met in person, sometimes even letting other people know I'm here for you. You can reach out to me. There's hope. You don't have to struggle alone. Sometimes that's enough for someone to pull themselves out of depression, just knowing that there's just one person out of 8 billion people on the planet that cares. Sometimes that.
You're so right. And so tell us about the books that you've written. You've been saying, 5-time best-selling author. What are these books that we clearly need to be reading?
Yeah, so my favorite book is Leap Afraid. So the concept behind my book is obviously leaping afraid. So rather than waiting for that perfect moment, getting ready to get ready, and waiting for the circumstances to align, for the knight in shining armor to come and save you, for for the shining star to fall from the sky. Yeah, I believe in the concept that for us to get anything out of life, we need to take action. And this also means taking action in the face of adversities, whether it's something, whether you're currently dealing with mental health or depression or whatnot. I believe in action, afraid. Because if you really wait for that perfect moment in time, then it's not very likely to happen, because rather than waiting for the perfect circumstance. I really believe in creating the perfect circumstances to change our life. So admittedly, when I wrote my book, I actually took a year out. It was my one year sabbatical. So that was a time in my life where I was feeling relatively low because by that point I had let go of my marketing business. And back then I worked 2 full-time jobs.
Wow.
So it wasn't exactly, in terms of my mental health or my mindset, wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, but it was also part of my journey. So I also had to become fiercely compassionate. And I just decided that my message that I'm here to share with the world is bigger than any fears, doubts, and insecurities that may come up for me. So this is what really inspired me to share my story of overcoming life-threatening illness, of becoming homeless, of then moving into a 7-bedroom mansion, of starting free businesses by the age of 30, of being born into poverty, being raised as one of 5 daughters, losing my dad at the age of 15, then moving across the sea at the age of 19, so leaving my family and friends, everything I ever knew, and to make a life for myself in a country that wasn't my own.
It's quite the story. I don't know if I could do that, but I mean, you obviously had some bravery that maybe I don't have to do that.
Yeah, so that's the whole concept behind it, because even sometimes when I look back and I'm still like in awe, like I was only 19. I don't feel like I was do what I did back then. So even like looking back, I feel like I have shown a lot of courage. So sometimes we can't really beat the crap out of ourselves because we feel like we are not further ahead. We're not as successful as we think we should be. And it's only when we look back on everything that I've already overcome, whether it's losing a parent or a sibling, whether it's sexual trauma, PTSD, or mental health issues, only when we look back that we can really recognize how awesome we really are, how much resilience and courage we have actually demonstrated over the years. Because when we look forward, we can see all the flaws, all the shortcomings, all the places we are not yet.
Yes.
It's only when we look back that we can actually see how great we really are.
Yeah, how far we've truly come. And where can people get a hold of this book and all of your books?
Yeah, so people can get a copy of my book on Amazon. So when you type in Leap Afraid, Sandra Stachowicz, so Stachowicz, then you'll likely find my book there. I could also try my own website. So I'll find the links on my own website, the bookalchemy.com, and you can find all the links to all my books. I have also co-authored and led multi-author projects. So some of my other books include compilations of stories of female entrepreneurs that also include some stories of women who experienced PTSD, who had to flee domestic violence with her 2 little girls. Another story was from a woman whose husband committed suicide. So obviously the emotional turmoil that it led to, so really lots of really compelling, interesting stories. So my last book is called Rebirth.
Oh, I like that name.
Yeah, I like it too, because that really shows the story of rebirth, reinvention, and rejuvenation. Because I believe that it's not so much what happens to us, but how we respond to it. So even if we've experienced some trauma or devastating events in our life, it's more about how we choose. It's not this story. It's not the story that happened to us. It's how we choose to define it. That really matters. Because we could share the exact same story coming either from a place of empowerment or coming from a place of victim mentality.
Yeah.
So it's more about how it's not so much about what happens to us, but how we define what happens to us.
That is so beautifully said. And I will be having those links down in the description below so everybody can very easily find you. And I'm going to assume that your social media accounts are on your website.
Oh, yes, they all are.
And so those links will also be down in the description below so that you can follow Sandra and see all of the cool things that she is getting up to. So thank you, Sandra, for being on the show, sharing with us. You had some really great insights that I loved, especially this concept of stop judging yourself. It's so important.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really enjoy being here. It's such a pleasure and an honor to share my message with everyone. I just wanted to share one last thing to your audience. You are not alone.
Beautiful. And on that note, thank you.
Thank you.
She was so much fun and quite the story of leaving home at such an early age. And I mean, she had so many great things to say, but one of the things that really, really stood out to me was that we need to take shame out of the equation. I loved how she said that. And that's what this show is all about, is taking the shame away, because we need to talk about mental health. It is so important. And if we hide it and we shame ourselves for having it, we're never going to be able to move forward. Make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button here at the channel. Show us some love. Share the videos out to everybody. If you're listening to a podcast style, of course, share the podcast out with everybody. We need to make sure that our message gets out there because, again, we're taking the shame out of the equation. And remember that the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.